It's time for a really good barbecued beef sandwich today. So what I'm going to be doing is smoking up a chuck roast to make some barbecue beef and bacon sandwiches. First step, we got to get our rub ready for this chuck roast. Very simple rub. I'm using 6 ingredients. A lot of the times I don't like to use more than 5, but this one needs that one extra little kick. So we're starting with a tablespoon of granulated garlic, a tablespoon of paprika, and it really doesn't matter what kind. If you want a smoky flavor, use smoked paprika. If you don't, use sweet. This is just a regular store-bought paprika. Yes, you can just use plain stuff in rubs. I have a tablespoon of cracked black pepper, half a teaspoon of a dark chili powder, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, and our final ingredient is half a teaspoon of cumin. The reason this is going in is because the sauce we're going to be using to make these barbecued beef sandwiches is a pretty sweet sauce, and I want a little bit more of that sort of southwestern hint in here with the cumin. Just going to get our lid on, mix it up. That's what we're looking for. Let's get the chuck roast out here. So what we're working with today is about a 2.5 pound USDA choice boneless chuck roast. We'll start seasoning this up. I get a very good coating on this. It's a pretty thick one too, so we want to make sure we get the edges. Sometimes chuck roasts, they really aren't, this 2-inch thick sort of thing. You can get them like an inch, inch and a half thick. If you can get the thicker ones like this though, grab them. And if any of you have any good recipes that you like for barbecue beef using chuck roast or any other cut, drop them in the comments below. I'd like to see them, and I know other people do too. People are always asking for recipes. Let's share some. And as I've mentioned before, I generally don't use binders if the meat has enough moisture to hold the rub, and this does. So this is ready. Now this is going to go in a bag in the refrigerator. I'm going to leave it in there overnight. You don't have to. I would leave it in at least a couple hours just to sort of absorb some of this rub, but I've got the time, so tomorrow we're going to take this out of the refrigerator and we're going to take it out to the Weber Kettle and smoke it up so we can have these barbecued beef and bacon sandwiches. So our chuck roast has been in the refrigerator overnight with that great rub on it, and we're going to be getting it on the kettle in just a few minutes, but first I want to show you something that I'm trying out on the kettle today. It's a new product and it's kind of interesting. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but I'm going to give it a go today with this chuck roast, so let me show you what it is. It's called the smoke plate, and it's kind of a divider, similar to something like a slow and sear, and it's a 1-piece unit that fits in a specific location in the kettle. So it lifts out like this, goes back in. On one side you put the charcoal, and then the other side becomes the indirect zone. One of the things that's interesting about it is that 2 sections of the vents on this type of Weber kettle sit underneath where the charcoal is, and one is on the indirect side. So you can see you can open and close. Now their instructions say, you can set it to half, 1/3, 2/3, whatever for different temperatures, leave it fully open. But what they also say is you close the lid vents fully, so you don't have any lid vents open at all. I even contacted them and asked them if they were sure about this, and they said their testing's shown that works, but if you want to use the lid vent, you can. It's totally up to you. So I'm going to play around with it today and see how it works. And I'm going to start with my vents fully open on this. And as you'll notice, you have to remove the lower charcoal grate for this to work, so there's no great place for a drip pan. So they just recommend you take sort of a medium foil pan, put it in like that. And that's what I'm going to do today. And I'm going to be using about 65 charcoal briquettes today. I actually counted them out. Now it seems like you could dump a full load of lit charcoal in here and you'd have a really hot fire, or you can use what they refer to as the snake method, which is just like it is in the slow and sear or something like that. You have one side ignited and it burns its way across slowly. So I'm going to go ahead and light one side of this charcoal. Now if I wanted to, I can add some water to this drip pan here, but I don't need any moisture with this chuck roast today. I'll be spritzing it if I need to. But let's go ahead and get our cooking grates on. All right, we're going to let the kettle come up to temp, and then we'll get our chuck roast out here and get it on. All right, the kettle is up to temp here. We're gonna go ahead and get our chuck roast on. Get my internal temperature probe in here. I'm gonna put a piece of hickory here for some smoke today. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get our lid on, get smoking. So the kettle temp I'm shooting for today is somewhere around 250 degrees. Using this smoke plate system for the first time, I'm not sure where it's going to end up. I'm going to have to sort of play with the vents a little bit to get used to it. I did decide to leave the lid vent about 1/3 open. I just want there to be a little more airflow. I may adjust that down as the day goes on. Now we're going to be taking this chuck roast to tenderness. That's somewhere in the 200 degree range. After about 2 hours, I'm going to check it, see how it's doing. We'll look at it and see if we need to spritz it if it's getting too dry. But when we hit about 160 internal, somewhere around the stall range, we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put it in a foil pan with some liquid, we'll cover that tightly, and we'll let it finish to the tenderness that we want. So I'll see you back here in a couple hours. All right, we are about 2 hours in, and as you can see, we have an internal temperature of 136 degrees and a kettle temp of 280. I've had a little bit of a challenge here trying to get this down to that 250 range. In the instructions, it mentions to use maybe 50 to 60. I have it between 60 and 70, so might have gone a little bit over there. But top vent is fully closed, bottom vent's at 1/3, and I mean, it's rocking, you know, a 279 right now. So if you're looking for that 275 range with this number of briquettes, it holds it really well. But let's go ahead and have a look here, see if we need to spritz and how we're doing. Really good color on there, already developing, but I can see it's actually a little dry. We have a pocket of moisture there. I'm gonna do a couple things here. I'm gonna spritz this with a mixture of water and apple juice. It's a 50-50 mixture, and then I'm actually gonna turn it. That's not something I usually do, but I'll explain why in a minute. Go ahead and turn this over. So one of the reasons I'm doing this, if you can see in the smoke plate there is a pretty large, logo that's laser cut through there, and that's allowing heat to go directly through and underneath. So there's really not a complete full stop barrier between the coal side and the indirect side. So I think there is getting some heat underneath on the bottom side of that chuck roast, so that's why I want to turn it. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. There are applications where you'd want that, but here I just want to make sure that I'm not getting too much heat on one side of this. The top has beautiful colors, you saw. And I'm also going to spray this side. I'm also going to add another piece of hickory here. All right, we're going to get the lid back on, keep smoking. And when we hit 160, we're going to put this in a foil pan with some liquid. Let it finish up. All right, we are just at about 160, and as you can see, the kettle temp is sort of stabilized in the mid 260s, and that is with the recommended smoke plate settings of the bottom vent at about 1/3 and the top vent closed. So I think I would be right around that 250 range if I had used fewer briquettes, maybe in the 50 to 60 range versus 60 to 70. So the directions do seem to work. All right, let's go ahead and get our lid off and get this chuck roast into a foil pan, get some liquid in it, get it covered, get it back on. Really, really good color on this. I'm actually just going to unplug my temperature probe wire from the ThermoWorks smoke because I'm going to leave the probe in where it is. We're going to work around that in the foil pan. I'm just going to put a little bit of liquid in here, and all this is the same spritzing liquid, 50-50 water to apple juice. Not very much. We're going to seal this up with a single layer of foil. Let's get this back on the kettle. I changed the food temperature alarm on the ThermoWorks smoke to 200 degrees, so when I hit that, I'll know. And we'll be checking that for tenderness right around that point. So let's get the lid back on and finish this up. I'll see you back here when we hit about 200 degrees internal. All right, we just hit 200 internal. Let's go ahead and give our chuck roast a check. Get my temperature probe out of here. Let's check this for tenderness. Oh yeah, that is feeling pretty darn tender there. Yeah, double checking temperatures there. That one's showing 200, showing 208 over here. So yeah, this chuck roast is ready. We're gonna let it rest for about an hour, and in a while we're gonna get our bacon ready right out here on the grill. Now we're gonna cook up some bacon directly on the grill, indirect. Maybe you let it pick up some of that leftover hickory smoke. We're gonna get our lid on. We'll check it in about 4 or 5 minutes. I think it's time to give our bacon a turn. And remember, how do I like my bacon? AFS, acceptable floppy state. Get the lid back on. We'll check this again in about 5 minutes. So I gave the bacon another turn about 2 minutes ago. Let's have a look and just kind of guesstimate how much longer it's going to be. That's looking and smelling great. All right, I'm going to let this go probably 5-7 more minutes, and then we're going to get it off, get it inside, and start building our barbecue beef and bacon sandwiches. All right, here is our finished chuck roast. It has been resting for actually about 1 hour and 15 minutes. It's still, warm to the touch. I think we're probably in the 100-degree range right now. But I've got to decide, do I want to pull it or do I want to slice it? And I think I'm going to slice it. I want some barbecue beef sandwiches with that bacon that are slices. So let's just get into this. So I'm just going to go straight down the middle first. Oh, nice. That is nice and juicy in there. Chuck roast sometimes will not come out as juicy as you want. It really does help to have some liquid in there in that sort of last phase if you wrap it up in a foil pan or just in foil. It just sort of helps. Obviously also the fat content in the chuck roast does help. This was a choice, so it does have a little bit more fat than say a select. If you're dealing with a prime or a Wagyu, you're really going to have some good juice in there. So let's go ahead and make some slices here that we're going to use to build our sandwiches. And we have a nice little smoke ring there too. Should I steal a taste? Yeah, I'm going to steal a taste. Oh, that's good. Looking good. All right, I'm going to finish slicing this up, and then we're going to come back and we're going to build our barbecue beef and bacon sandwich. So I'm going to be using an onion bun today to build this barbecue beef and bacon burger. So we've got a nice little toasted onion bun there. We're just going to start laying in some of our chuck roast. Put as much as you want on there. I like to stack it about too high. Next comes barbecue sauce. Now a lot of people will just take these slices and dip them in there, get them really sloppy. Nothing wrong with that. I just want to drizzle mine on. And this is a homemade Dr. Pepper barbecue sauce. I made this for another video a few days ago, and I'll put a link to that video in the description below and up here in the corner so you can check that out. Super easy to make and a nice, sweet, kind of tangy barbecue sauce. You get a good amount on here. Next comes some AFS bacon, acceptable floppy state. I'll put about 3 half pieces on there. And then final ingredient, because I don't want to go over the top on this, is pickles. Just a few pickles here. I think when you have such great beef flavor like that, you don't need to add a lot of stuff. You want a little bit, but heck, it's really up to you. You want to pile on more stuff here, cheese, coleslaw, anything you want, go for it. This is a sandwich that you can make your own. Finally, top of our bun, it's ready. It's time to taste. So here we go, barbecue beef and bacon sandwich. I've been looking forward to this for a few hours now, so let's see. Oh, really good. The total thing is such a nice mix of flavors. You have that little bit of a spice from the rub on the chuck roast. You have the sweetness of the barbecue sauce. You have that nice bite of the pickle and the bacon. Come on, it's bacon. And onion on the onion bun. All these layers here work really well together. Tender and juicy chuck roast took about 5 hours. I find that chuck roasts usually take somewhere between 4.5 and 6 hours at this size. Some of the bigger ones take a little bit longer. And this one actually turned out exactly the way I like it. Still juicy inside, a little bit of a smoke ring, nice color on the outside, not really developing too much of a bark there, but I can't complain about the flavor or anything about this. Now as for the smoke plate I was testing, I think if I had dialed it in a little bit sooner and really just kept that lid vent closed, I probably could get about 6 hours of cook time out of it. That's close to the slow and sear. The slow and sear I can usually get around 7 hours at that 250 to 275 range. So I probably should have just followed the instructions, what they said, keep that lid vent closed. It just sounds counterintuitive to me, but it did work and it does work. Also, I think I should have kept fewer briquettes in there, as I mentioned, started out with the lower end. You can always add more. And I think I would have been able to keep it really right around that 250. As it was, once it was dialed in, it was more in the 265, 270 range. But nothing wrong with that. It cooked perfectly. The only two things I'd like to see with that, the smoke plate, is that laser cut logo that opens up sort of a passageway between the direct grilling side and the indirect grilling side. I'd like to see that smaller. I think it does maybe allow just a little too much heat through. It's not a deal breaker, but I'd like to see it smaller so that you really have a true indirect side and a true direct side, and you're not sort of bleeding some of that direct heat through that laser cut logo onto the indirect side to come up under the food. The other thing I'd like to see are a little bit more detailed instructions. I've mentioned this before when I've tried products that people have sent me, and I like clear instructions that really tell you everything up front. And in the instructions, what I'd like to see is a little bit more descriptiveness in the way that they want you to light the charcoal and use the charcoal. They just mentioned basically the snake method and other. And really, I'd like to see them talk about, hey, you know, you're lighting it at one side, it's gonna burn about this long with this many coals when your vents are at this setting. Just a sort of a general guide. I always like more information because you never know when someone buys something like this or gets it as a gift, how much experience they have grilling or smoking. They may have very little. So instructions do help there. But all in all, it's a nice unit and it is super solidly built. I mean, it's a quality build. I believe it's built here in the US in Orange County where I live. The company is based in Orange County. They contacted me and asked if they could send me this, and they did. So I'll put a link down below to their Amazon listing. I looked and I don't think they have a website to check, so you can go to the Amazon listing and check that out if you want. But yeah, it's an interesting unit, and it's interesting in the way that they decided to set it up where you remove the charcoal grate and this just goes straight down to the bottom of the kettle and kind of really seals an indirect and a direct side. But back to the sandwich for another bite, because man, this is good. Oh, so what is there to say? It's chuck roast, it's bacon, it's a great barbecue sauce, a bun, some pickles. This is one of the most satisfying and flavorful barbecue sandwiches you can make. Simple, chuck roast is easy to get, turns out fantastic. I'm really liking this.